Hey everybody, I'm Zach,
And I'm Jesse.
and you're watching In Depth.
On Now You Know.
So, have you heard about the most boring announcement ever?
Yeah, this was not that boring, actually.
No, it was really interesting.
Elon called it boring, but he likes to call lots of things to do with the Boring Company boring, usually when they're not boring.
Yeah, and I thought we'd help break this down for you because the audio was not that great. In fact, the whole presentation wasn't that well done for something that I think was astounding.
Yeah.
Elon was explaining what's going on with the Boring Company, and there's a lot of cool information in here. And anytime you've got Elon on stage for an hour, you know you're going to find out some cool stuff. So let's just dive in. So one of the things we learned from Elon is that the traditional boring machines need to have some kind of cable to connect them to their power source. And he would like to run his, and he is, more like a cordless drill.
Right. So instead of having to run really thick, long cables all the way through the tunnel, and that the cable obviously has to get longer as you go down a tunnel, which is probably going to be miles and miles, instead he's going to have basically just like a cordless drill, battery packs. They hooked up a bunch of power walls, or power packs rather, put it on a train car, sent it down the tunnel, and then hooked up the power pack right to the boring machine. So no longer do you have to run all these cables, which takes a lot of time, because again, you go down a mile, now you have to go wire a mile's worth of cable.
And you don't have to have as much ventilation shaft because you're not getting rid of all of the fumes from your muck cart, which traditionally was diesel powered.
Right. So now they have fully electric, battery powered, battery operated muck cart locomotives. So they made their own little trains basically down in the tunnels. What they did was they took some Model 3 motors and
Two Model 3 motors to be exact.
some power packs, and they just made a cart.
Yeah, in fact, they made the world's biggest battery electric locomotive pulling the muck cart, which is 250,000 pounds of muck that they pull out at a time.
The amount of innovation that the Boring Company is able to just do because they have access to all of this great stuff. I mean, usually if you wanted like a really big, powerful electric motor, you'd have to like go source it from Bosch or something. But instead, they just headed down to the Tesla warehouse and were like, could we have 2 motors, please? And they said, absolutely.
So the next thing that we learned is that the concrete that they create to line the tunnel is they're using the dirt from the hole that they just made to help make the concrete.
Right. And you'd think that this would be something that would always happen because it makes so much sense. But this is not the case. Most tunnels are lined with concrete that comes from someplace else.
Right. Normally you get the muck out and you have to pay to dump it somewhere.
Right. And it's just a big pile of dirt.
Right.
And, oh well.
And so he's talking about that they're making bricks from the muck that they pull out of the tunnel. They are pressurizing it.
They add a little bit of cement.
A little bit of cement, and they get it up to a load of 5,000 PSI, which, if you know about concrete, that's more than concrete can take. So they're making these perfect bricks. As Elon describes them, they're way better than cinder blocks. They're incredibly smooth. They have a higher compressive strength than concrete. And he wants them to be used at first to build life-size Lego kits.
And he's also thinking that it can be used for affordable housing because
That's right.
you were just going to be creating, you dig a tunnel and now all of that becomes brick. It used to just be waste, and now it's very cheap building material.
Yeah, I mean, 15 to 20% of the cost of the tunnel used to be just the muck removal. Now what they're talking about is turning these bricks into something that could actually sell for, like he said, 10 cents a brick.
Right.
And so now you're turning something that was waste into profit.
This cost reduction kind of gets to where the cost to build a highway, right, per lane is somewhere between $1 to $4 million a mile.
Yeah, per lane.
Per lane. So if you're thinking of a standard like 3-lane highway, that's anywhere from $3 to $12 million a mile.
Right.
And if you can get tunnels down to about that cost, that means that why would you build a highway on the surface where people live, and that's valuable real estate when you can just put it underground.
And now in LA, I mean, on highways like the 405, you can't make those any more efficient. If you put another lane, it immediately gets filled up.
This is one of the things that they discussed during this talk, which was that opponents of like building bigger highways and adding lanes and stuff like that will usually talk about inciting demand. So if you put another lane on a highway, then more people are likely to use it because they know that more, there's another lane, you can fit more cars, and now you're stuck with the same level of traffic.
Right.
But what Elon was saying was that if you incite more demand, you can just make another tunnel directly below the one before. And he said you could get up to hundreds of levels below with a 2-dimensional plane where, you have to build highways on it. it's such a impossible problem because every lane is more and more land. But once you go underground, you take care of that problem.
Right. He's talking about the fact that when you're in your three-dimensional office tower and then you have to empty out into a two-dimensional plane, you just pack it with people because everyone's leaving and arriving at the same time.
Right.
What's really cool about this loop is that there's going to be many different stations in the city. So unlike a traditional train where thousands of people get off at the same station and you create this traffic at the top of the station, you're going to have so many stations where a pod with 8 to 16 people are going to get off at a time, which won't increase traffic.
It's just this thing that we just have not had before, which is it's like a brand new concept of travel.
And we're talking about traveling at speeds of about 150 miles an hour.
Right.
So just to give you some idea, if you went from downtown LA to LAX, you could do that in 8 minutes.
Right.
And the cost would be
$1 per person. So even a bus ride is usually $2.
Right.
That's cheaper than driving your own car.
Yeah. Now, so this is loop we just talked about, and it gets kind of confusing because it has the word loop in it, and we've been talking about hyperloop. A hyperloop would connect cities.
Right.
And so that would be traveling about, so you could go from LA to San Francisco in 30 minutes.
Right.
And that would be traveling at speeds faster than an airplane.
Right.
The loop would be smaller pods, those you just hop onto with your bike or as a pedestrian, or maybe you get a sled that you put your car onto, and those would travel at about 150 miles an hour. Also, this is privately funded. So the tunnel that's going under LA, it's not like it's paid for with your federal tax dollars. This is all being paid for by the Boring Company.
A lot of people are worried about earthquakes in LA because LA has lots of earthquakes.
Right.
And this is interesting, something I didn't know, which is that as soon as you get underground, earthquakes really don't affect you very much. Elon said that it's similar to being in a submarine during like a hurricane or something
Or
like that.
tsunami.
Right. So even though on the surface there's all sorts of
Turbulence.
craziness and turbulence going on the surface, below the surface there's almost nothing. And in one of the cases, it was a 5.3 earthquake, and they said that all of the trailers on the surface were getting rocked around, and then everyone who was in the tunnel said that they didn't realize that there was an earthquake, and that's a pretty sizable earthquake.
Yeah, and as he pointed out, I mean, it's the safest place to be in an earthquake, and in fact, in many cities where there's been horrible earthquakes, you are told to go down into the subways or the tunnels to be safe, and that's how you evacuate a place. So yeah, he was pointing out that even though like it seems to you that maybe that's a bad place to be, it's actually a safe place to be.
Right.
And he said if you can build it in LA, it's kind of like with plays in New York. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. So if you can build a loop in LA, you can build it pretty much anywhere. Then of course Elon became Elon, and well, let's just cut to it.
In order to get public feedback, we want to sort of offer free rides, and it'd be like, sort of like a weird little Disney ride in the middle of LA. But I think we can make it really fun. Bring your flamethrower. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a good point. It's not a flamethrower.
That's right.
Yeah, so as Steve reminded him, maybe don't bring the flamethrower, maybe not bring.
Well, it's
bring
a not flamethrower. Yeah, I think the interesting thing here is that they're really looking for public feedback, because obviously Elon can make the most engineered solution, but it might not necessarily be what everyone wants. So they're actually going to have it be like a little ride between, through the loop, so they can assess what people think of it.
And Elon was reminding people that there's already a subway in LA, so it's not like this is unheard of. He said there's zillions of permits. There's city, county, and state permits. They've already done a 1,500-page study, and they'll continue to do more studies as they're required to. But they have asked for an exemption from a state environmental study because they don't know exactly what they're doing yet, and it takes 1 or 2 years to do that study. And he said we don't want to do that study and then turn out not to do that particular project. So that's why they're doing the test tunnel first.
Right. So this is the CEQA study, and some people are worried about it because they've got an exemption from it, but it sounds like they are going to do the CEQA study once they kind of understand what they're going to be doing.
Right. And then he showed this, which is a map of travel times. And this isn't exactly what they're going to build out, but it's an idea of what they could build out. And this shows travel times to different places in LA. And now if you're not from LA, this might be like, oh, I don't really know what's the big deal. If you get on the road in LA pretty much at any time of day, you are not going to move. The highways are completely blocked. There's just the infrastructure does not work properly. They don't have a mass transit system, and so you can't get from one place to another in a reasonable amount of time. So these times are incredible. If you live in LA, you know that.
A lot of the questions that people had were like, well, how deep are you going to go? Aren't you going to hit utilities and pipes and electrical and stuff like that? Basically, what they said was that if you make a tunnel, as long as you're 2 diameters below the surface, so whatever size tunnel you make, let's say it's a foot, as long as you're 2 feet below the surface, there's no effect to the surface. So their tunnels are about 14 feet in diameter. So you double that, you get 28, and then they round up to 30. So they think that 30 feet below the surface is going to be good as the minimum depth.
Right.
But they said they can go way deeper, and basically, when in doubt, go deeper, right?
And Elon said, if we're digging a tunnel and you can feel it, please come work for us, because you obviously either have some amazing technology that we don't have, or you have some amazing spidey senses or something. He basically said you cannot sense when someone's digging a tunnel 30 feet below you.
They said that you can detect footsteps, and that the footsteps on the surface will be of higher seismic magnitude than what's going on below the surface.
Right.
So they've set up these prisms on Hawthorne's streets.
Wait, what are prisms?
Like actual reflective things.
Oh.
And they're constantly being autonomously measured.
Okay.
To see if there's any dips or differences in the road surface.
Oh, okay.
And if there's a change of 1/20th of an inch, everyone at the Boring Company gets an email, everything stops, and they need to address it. That hasn't happened yet, obviously, but basically they've said that they really want to be a good neighbor to everyone.
And they're using rocket technology to build very simple things. Tunnels are pretty simple. And he said they're using SpaceX employees and engineers. And he used this very interesting analogy. He showed an empty warehouse in 2003, which is what SpaceX looked like in 2003. And then he showed the Falcon Heavy in 2018. So you go forward 15 years and you go from an empty warehouse to the most technologically advanced rockets on Earth. And that's what he can bring to Boring Company.
This is an industry and an infrastructure system that has really not progressed in a very long time. There just has not been any kind of support to, like, let's investigate tunnels. No one has cared.
Right.
Everyone was like, well, I guess we need to make a tunnel, and it's going to be really expensive.
Well, and
darn it.
Have you ever thought that, like, these problems that go on decade after decade and no one has a solution for? I mean, politicians will promise, better roads occasionally or a new, bridge somewhere, but no one has ever promised that there'll be no traffic. It's almost like believe now that that can't possibly happen.
Right.
Along comes Elon and he talks about autonomous cars and boring tunnels, and he's actually addressing the problem in ways that actually, according to physics, can work.
Right.
I thought it was funny when we got to the question and answer period. Of course, people were asking about the flamethrowers. The question was, when am I going to get my flamethrower? And Jesse and I want to know that too. Well, we just learned that they're having problems with the delivery because I guess delivering a flamethrower with a tank of propane is not something
somewhat problematic. It seems.
So how did he solve the problem?
They got a Boring Company van, and they're going to start just custom delivering Boring Company flamethrowers.
Yeah, within 2 weeks, the first ones are going to start.
That's problem solving for you, right?
I mean, so we might have a van pull up in the driveway
a Boring Company van
with a flamethrower in
I
it.
know. I can't wait.
I'm really excited. So Linestorm is the name of their second boring machine. This was after waiting for Godot. And this is 2 to 3 times faster than current machines. So the second machine, he's already figured out how to make it go 2 to 3 times faster. And of course, we're talking about speeds that are similar to a snail.
Slower than a snail.
Right.
At the moment, yeah.
He's basically told his team to beat his snail Gary. And that is pretty amazing because right now, the speeds that we're talking about drilling tunnels is really incredibly slow.
Prufrock will be their first fully designed Boring Company machine. It should be 10 to 15 times faster than current machines. So the way that they can achieve these crazy numbers is with continuous drilling and segmentation direction. So continuous drilling means that obviously you just keep drilling.
Okay.
And then putting up segments is something that usually takes longer than the drilling itself. So as they drill, they're putting up segments as they go. So that's a huge time saver because you don't have to stop the machine,
right.
And start putting stuff up like that.
And then he said it's really simple. It's not rocket science. You need to get the dirt out fast, right? That's one of the things that slows you down the most. So
right.
He said they figured out they needed 2 lanes to speed things up. And he said it's actually a huge thing because then as you're bringing stuff out, you can be bringing your next truck back in. So they just invented that.
Right. So, I mean, you're constantly bringing in, concrete to put up, and you're also bringing out the dirt that you just drilled. being able to do both at the same time means that you are able to speed everything up.
And of course, he said a lot of these things are, well, let's let him say it.
Like a lot of these things are really quite boring.
Someone asked him, are you going to throw a party when this is ready to be opened? And in true Elon style, he said this would be a really trippy place to throw a party, a post-apocalyptic feel to it. Well, this is what he said.
I was thinking like this would be like a really trippy place to throw a party, you know? But it'd be like really fun and like feel like, I don't know, like post-apocalyptic or something. You know?
So there's going to be a party.
Right.
Do you think they're going to invite people?
I really hope that they do. The interesting thing, the fun thing to me is that Elon is so fun. That he's not just like,
this is a company, we're going to be very serious, and blah, 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 blah.
he's like, hey, you know what? That would be really cool. That would be really fun with everything that he does, you know, and that's, you know, why we have, you know, flamethrowers / not flamethrowers. That's why we're going to have a party in a tunnel. He wants to make everything he does fun because when things are fun, people care about them.
Why do you think he had this conference? He's looking for one thing from us people. He's looking for our support.
Yep.
That's it. He knows how to do the technology. He just needs us to get behind it, to write letters to our council people. So if you're in California for sure, if you're in the LA region, write to your council person, to your mayor, whoever, and say, I'm in favor of the Boring Company tunnel. Let's try it out. What's the worst thing that can happen? You try it out and it doesn't work the way it's planned.
And let's say you're in some other city. You're not in California at all. Go talk to people who are on your local councils or stuff like that and just say, hey, I just wanted to let you guys know. I know that this probably won't happen for another, couple of years or something like that. But this might be something, if we're thinking about traffic, people, this might be something to look into.
Exactly.
Just get people to, start looking into it, start accepting it, because, the longer you're looking at stuff like this and the more you follow it, the better an understanding you're going to have. So that means that in a couple years when LA now has a loop system and people are starting to go on it and it's amazing, that means that if you got the ball rolling ahead of time, maybe your city could be the next one.
Really good point, Jesse, because in a couple of years when this is proven to work, there are going to be cities lined up to get this, and the Boring Company is going to have to put you on a waiting list.
Right.
I mean, we all know about the Model 3 waiting list.
Right.
Do you want that to happen to you?
Right.
So get in there early. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. We do the show for you. Please support us, and the way you can do that is by going to Patreon. What do you get for that, Jess?
So for as little as $1 a month, you can get our weekly Patreon bonus stories. And this is, news stories that have been happening through the week, fun stuff that we want to talk to our patrons about. We also have things like t-shirts, posters. We have a live stream that we do every month where we are talking directly to our patrons, and it's really awesome. So I encourage you to head over to patreon.com, search for Now You Know, and just look and see how you would like to support us. Again, the littlest little bit helps. So thank you so much for watching. Now You Know.